Ramon Magsaysay was a legend. A palliative, if not quite the cure to a national cancer. In life, the object of overwhelming hysteria. And after his death, of fanatical cultism. But that everything ended there. Others have likened Ramon Magsaysay to a burst of light in the sky that had to blaze across the political firmament, and having served his purpose like a flare, he had to die. A momentary star, a myth. But Ramon Magsaysay was not a myth. He was quite real as flesh and blood and sweat and tears and death. And what, after all, can be more real than death, or loneliness, or solitude? The desolation that must go hand in hand with dedication. For if Ramon Magsaysay had been anything, he was dedicated. His mission, a compelling urgency to accomplish. He had to rush, he had to hurry on. He must have known he only had a portion of time to do his work in. In this, Ramon Magsaysay could not be denied. He had a tryst to remember, an engagement to fulfill. He had an appointment to keep at Mount Manungal.
On August 31st, 1907, in the little town of Ibazambales, Ezequiel Magsaysay, a carpenter blacksmith, paused from his work. His second child, a boy, was presented to him by his wife, Perfecta del Fiero. Baptized Ramon, the baby grew and was reared as a Catholic in his parents' devout household. As a child, Monching loved to wade in the little creek behind their house. Or he fashioned colorful kites. Or he gathered water from an old barrio well. Conquered forests. Helpful, industrious, he helped his father in the smithy. Ramon's family then moved north to the windswept town of Castillejos. Here he grew up and showed a particular talent for mechanical jobs. Thoroughly smitten by a simple country lass, the pretty Luz Manson from Bataan. He recalls,
when I was courting her, I had many rivals. And of course, they visited her in Calit and in Bataan, sporting Cadillacs and Packards, and using the most expensive clothes. I used to visit her by using my overall, because I was then a mechanic, and using a small Ford car. And every time my car approached the home of Mrs. Magsaysay, and the Packards or Cadillac were parked, my Ford was so nervous that the fenders used to shake.
He did his job well as repairman, and eventually he was promoted and made manager of Tritron. His happy marriage, meanwhile, was blessed with 3 children, Teresita, Milagros, and Ramon Jr. Living for them was a modest matter, and it remained completely uneventful until the outbreak of war in 1941. Shortly before the fall of Bataan, he joined Lieutenant Colonel Thorpe, and together they organized the Western Luzon guerrilla forces. Upon the death of Colonel Thorpe, Magsaysay and his men led the American forces in the liberation of Zambales. On February 4th, 1945, he was appointed military governor of Zambales. Monching's life as public servant continued with his election as representative of Zambales by the biggest majority in the political history of that province. As a congressman, he brought home the Rogers Bill for the veterans. In the countryside, the hooks had taken over. The people were poor, hungry, and discontented. They were ready for subversion. The farmers had turned a receptive ear to the siren song of the communists. President Quirino saw fit to appoint Magsaysay, then an obscure congressman from Zambales, to the extremely critical post of Secretary of National Defense on September 1st, 1950. What Magsaysay accomplished is now history. Before long, he had rejuvenated the demoralized army, instilled new confidence in government leadership, and he had the hooks on the run. He weeded out the army deadwood, whipped the then undisciplined armed forces into line, and sent them out to the mountains after the hooks. Employing unorthodox methods that were applauded and subsequently copied in other parts of the globe, Magsaysay captured William Pomeroy, one of the most formidable communist leaders in the country. He caused the total disintegration of the dreaded Hook Politburo. Long-hungry Hooks were now going back to peaceful society, as RM assured them land and new opportunities through his daring, world-famed EDCOR program, where he guaranteed former Hooks with legal ownership of the earth they had fenced and plowed, as he made possible their reclamation of self-respect and their rightful place among their countrymen. This was in 1951, and 1951 was an election year. The people thought elections would mean the usual shameless vote buying and open violence, but they reckoned without Magsaysay. Magsaysay, by utilizing his own group, kept the election clean. The popular mandate prevailed, giving the Philippines one of the most orderly, one of the most peaceful elections in its political history. By 1952, the pattern had been set. His name was mentioned everywhere people gathered to talk. Everyone said, if he runs for president in 1953, he would get my vote. No audience was too small, no barrio so insignificant that he would not stay to explain his mission. He went to every village, hurdling fences and jumping over puddles, crossing mountains and fording rivers. And everywhere he went, he told the people, put me in office, and I will give you a government that is for you. Put me in office, and I will drive out the crooks in the government. The people believed him. They believed him because he was their kind of man, not a fancy-talking politician full of promises, but empty of fulfillment. They believed him because, in his disarming smile, his humility, his shyness, he was a convincing personality. The thundering chorus of cheers that swelled out from the crowd each time he joined them, walked with them, talked with them, was echoed in the roaring landslide of votes that crushed his opponent and swept him to Malacanang on a tidal wave of great expectations. From the low rumblings of dissatisfaction, now rose the voice of the people, promising, hopeful. RM's election was a victory, not so much for the mechanic from Zambales. This was more a resounding personal victory of the people. Everyone will remember how RM tried the presidential chair for size. How proudly, and yet how humbly, he carried his head high. The date, December 30th, 1953. The glorious day marking his inauguration, when over the din of a million voices, words said in promise were drowned out by the nation's overwhelming joy, merely in seeing him assume leadership of the country.
I have been warned that too much is expected of this administration, that our people expect the impossible. For this young and vigorous nation of ours, nothing is really impossible.
The legend had begun. Man of the people, the touch of his hand, a benediction, but always RM and the people. When he promised the doors of Malacanang would be open to the people, his age thought he was speaking in metaphors. RM was speaking literally. He had a friendly hand for poor and rich alike. Perhaps he clasped the poor man's hand a little longer. For them who had less in life, he vowed to give more in law. Upon assuming the presidency, RM embarked on a program that revolved around one basic beneficiary, the people. The country began seeing copious irrigation canals around their farms. He extended health services beyond provincial capitals. He brought medical attention to those in far-flung barrios, giving the people the benefits due but long denied them. Wherever 3 or 4 nipa houses could be found, roads had to be built. Wherever there were minds willing to learn, he provided schools to teach them. And artesian wells, there could not be enough of them. Safe, pure water to drink. Too many thousands of people were dying because of gastrointestinal diseases caused by polluted water. Liberty wells had become a rallying cry in the barrios. The moving, guiding hand was always perceptible. RM's. He had made a solemn pledge to give land to the landless, and now he was determined to fulfill that promise.
Mga kababayan, maraming administrasyon na nagdaan. Marami ng presidente ang mga nagdaan at marami ng kongreso ang mga nagdaan. Ngunit yan land reform bill na tinatawag, walang nakakayang gumawa niyan. Bakit? Sapagkat malakas ang pangkatin ng mayroon at kailan paman at magagawa nila ng paraan na yung mga lupang asyendang malalaki ay hindi mahati-hati upang ibudbud at ipagbiling hornalan sa mga wala ay hindi magaganap yan. Ngayon lamang naganap yan, mahal kong kababayan, sapagkat itong administrasyon na ito, ang sagisag ay para sa maliliit, para sa mga wala, upang guminhawa ang mga wala.
This was his eloquent translation of social justice, from mere words in a political speech to actual implementation in the fields.
The people in the far-flung villages and foothills of the mountain don't understand what is social justice. Today, we have to join our efforts together to make them feel what is social justice, to make them know what is social justice. Social justice should not only be a thought, it should be something tangible that the poor man starving in one of the areas of our country will feel, will touch, and will know what exactly is social justice in our administration.
Such was RM's magnetic leadership that Congress, even against its better judgment, passed the land tenure bill. Always the builder, the mechanic, RM interested himself in machines, but more particularly the men who manned them, for greater productivity, for greater income, for a better way of life for the Filipino citizen. R.M.'s administration laid the basis for what in years to come would be a flowering progress in the fields of commerce, industry, and manufacturing. President Magsaysay's tenure of office was marked by an upsurge in the country's prestige in world affairs.
We are prepared to live up to all our obligations under our mutual defense treaty with the United States.
The traditional friendship with the United States was maintained, and associations with neighboring countries expanded and enhanced. This was Ramon Magsaysay, the president, revered, honored, respected. This was Ramon Magsaysay, the head of a simple, well-knit family, loved, cherished, adored. But Magsaysay's most natural role, the role he loved best and endeared him to the teeming millions in the countryside, was simply that of friend of the common man.
At noong araw ng maliit ninyong lingkod ay sumumpa sa luneta na maglilingkod ng tapat at buong puso at kaluluwa sa bayan at lalong-lalo na sa kapwa niyang maliliit. Ayan sa gisag na naisigaw ko ay walang iba kung hindi. Yan simbolong yan ang pagtulong at pagbuhat sa mga hihirap na kababayan natin dito sa Pilipinas.
It was this preoccupation with the masses that made R.M. use the people's opinion as his guidepost for his public actuations. The criterion, the scrutiny of the people he had vowed to serve. It was as simple as that. R.M. had seen in his own parents' way of life the perfect example of humility that a great man must assume if history is to judge him kindly and well. Their son is not with them anymore, but today there are two lonely old people in Castillejos who are quite content. Their son had truly learned well. There were lessons taught in turn. To Monigo, the village bakya maker. Of course, I'll wear your bakya, even if I am president now. They are still the same feet, you know. Another boyhood friend, simple and direct. The nation, whose advice was as important as a full-scale national referendum. Mang Mamerto, R.M.'s hunting guide, boyhood companion on the trails of Zambales Mountains. Zaiko, former hook commander, who would become an active self-help project leader of the province. These were close friends, but they were, principally, integral parts of a nation that he was trying to build. Many were puzzled about why Magsaysay always insisted on going back to Manila the same day whenever he went out on his numberless official trips. Despite the lateness of the hour, the uncertainty of the weather, the danger of travel at night, he made it a point to come home. They were puzzled until one of them suggested that perhaps he did so because he wanted to be with his family as much as possible. Ramon Magsaysay was a good family man. Not demonstrative, perhaps, or overly articulate about how much he loved his wife and children. But in every act of his was mirrored his deep affection for his family, his abiding concern for them. Luz filled his life completely. She was everything a man could ask for in a wife, and he was grateful. Had begun running fast. R.M. was rushing. The tryst had to be kept at Mount Manungal. It was a tryst that began on the 16th of March, 1957. It was just another presidential chore, speaking engagements that he had to make in several universities in Cebu, and Mount Manungal was in Cebu. Time was running short. A speech here for the youth of Cebu, a quick trip to another university, a word of advice to graduating students, gratitude for the conferment of academic honors. But already his eyes seemed to scan more distant horizons. A speech at San Carlos University, Then a hasty farewell. Old and young, saying their goodbyes. A moment for plans that had to be ordered before the trip home. A parting conference with world neighbors. A kind but firm refusal to stay for the night. It was 10 minutes past 1 o'clock in the morning of Sunday, and RM was crossing the strip towards the plane, PAF 925. According to reporter Nestor Mata, the last words they heard in the plane were those of the pilot. This is the presidential plane, PAF 925, Mount Pinatubo, Ulahog Airport. We are now leaving your tower frequency. We are now leaving your tower frequency. Approaching Mount Manungal. Good morning to you. And then, nothing else.
Kung ito ang ikakamatay ng maliit ninyong lingkod at alipin na si Magsaysay, hindi baling mamatay ako dito sa panahon na ito. Mapakita ko lamang sa inyo. Maipakita ko lamang sa inyo na kayo ay mahal sa amin sapagkat kaming lahat ay inyo. Kami ay nagsusweldo dito dahil sa kami ay alipin ninyo, hindi upang magpasarap at magpayaman sa gobyernong ito.
A whole nation reeled in dismay, disbelief. It was stunned, lost. Slowly the truth emerged in its cruel reality. Ramon Magsaysay was dead. That is, his body was dead. There was no doubt about that. They had found his badly burnt shoe. They found a handkerchief, a watch, some headache pills. RM, the man, was gone. The tryst had been kept. Still unbelieving, more than 2 million people turned out to meet the remains of the president. That one so dearly loved could have died so suddenly, so wastefully, so unceremoniously, was incomprehensible. One had to see for himself. One had to touch the coffin to believe. And even then, how could a valiant heart be stopped? For a beloved voice muted and still. As the people dazedly ran forward, moved back, stood still, or joined the ever-growing mass of humanity, there was no doubt. RM's voice, ringing clear and true, must have echoed in their ears.
Ang paglilingkod sa gobyerno ay hindi binibilang kung ilang taon. Kung hindi, kung anong nagawa mo sa bayan, yan ang dapat natin sukatin sa isang paglilingkod sa bayan. Maaaring maging 40 taon ang isang tao sa gobyerno. Maaaring ako 4 na taon lang, mahal kong kababayan. Ngunit, maaari kong sabihin, ginawa natin lahat ang kaya natin. At mahirap pala ang maglingkod sa bayan kung ibibigay mo lahat ang kaluluwa mo sa bayan. Madaling maglingkod sa bayan kung ikaw ang isipin mo ay magpapasasa, magpapayaman, magpapatakbo ng hagad yan, numero 1 ang autobot, bibigyan mo ng 5 bandera. Madali yan. Ngunit kung iniisip mo, araw at gabi, ay ang mga naghihirap na mga taong walang trabaho, mga taong nagugutom bayan, mamamatay ka sapagkat ganyan ang nangyayari sa akin, sapagkat ang pagmamahal ko sa bayan at pagmamahal ko sa inyo, gaya ng pagmamahal ko rin sa sarili kong pamilya at sarili kong mga anak.
Now he rests in solitude, peace, tranquility, well earned and deserved. They have said of him, this country of ours is the better for his having walked among us. And indeed, Magsaysay walked in the glory of adulation. He walked with the highest, and he walked with the humblest, and each deemed him his own. RM will be remembered by the millions in the rural sections of our country, by them whose way of life has been enriched, by them who conduct careful research so that agricultural productivity should be protected. From them will come the tangible offerings coconut from every tree for Magsaysay. For the people, hectares of land that will be developed to yield more and better rice. For this generation, his words and his ideals will ring with challenge, with pride, with hope.
I can tell you that I am proud of my race, that I am proud of my generation, that I am proud of the nation we created in so short a time and in the face of such tremendous odds.